Have you ever read a book and then after you are done reading, someone asks you, "Can you tell me what that story was about?" You might not be sure how to answer this question when they ask. You might not know which parts of the story to tell them about. That's why it's important to know how to retell a story. But what is a retell? A retell is a reading strategy we can use to tell the most important parts of a story from beginning to end. When we tell someone about a book we read, we can't tell them everything that happened in the book, but we can decide which parts are the most important to share in our retell. We've been reviewing story elements throughout this unit. Do you remember what they are? We have characters, setting, the problem or goal, events, and the solution. These story elements are the most important parts of the story, and these are what we would include in our retell. Now, this can seem like a lot to remember, but I'm going to show you how easy it is to do with the 5-finger retell. So I want you to hold up your hand like you're going to give me a high five. Show me your hand. Our hand is going to be our reading tool. For our retell, we will use each one of our fingers to represent an important part of our story. So our first finger is our characters. What is a character? A character is who our story is about. The character could be a person, an animal, or a creature, and a story can have just one character, or it can have many characters. The next finger is our setting. What is a setting? The setting is where the story takes place. Does it take place in a forest, in the city, in a house, at the beach, or in a school? Does the story take place in more than one location? Our third finger is the problem or the goal in our story. What is the problem that the characters are dealing with, or what is the goal that our characters are trying to achieve throughout the story? The problem or goal is usually what the story is mostly about. Our fourth finger tells us the events. This just means what happens in the story. For the events, we would use words like first, next, then, after, or last. We describe things that happen to the characters throughout the story. Our last finger tells us about the solution in the story. How was the problem solved, or how was the goal achieved? Or maybe the problem wasn't solved and the goal wasn't achieved. Every book is different, and this is an important point to include in your retell so that your reader knows whether it was fixed or not. Now that we have reviewed the 5-finger retell strategy and our important story elements, let's put our tool into action. Let's start this with a story that we've read together in class before called Stephanie's Ponytail by Robert Munsch. So, if we wanted to retell the story of Stephanie's Ponytail, let's think back to our 5-finger retell. What was the first finger? Do you remember? The first finger is characters. Who are the characters in the story? Well, this book had a few characters, but the main ones were Stephanie, her mom, and her classmates. These characters are on our first finger on the 5-finger retell. Now, does anybody remember the next finger? It's our setting. Where does the book Stephanie's Ponytail take place? Well, the setting is in Stephanie's house and her school. This is where most of the story takes place. It has more than one location. Sorry, I forgot my E in Stephanie's house. Does anybody remember our next finger? It's what's the problem in the story. Do you remember what the problem is? Stephanie wants to wear her hair up in a different way than everybody else, and her classmates call it ugly. But then they copy her exact same hairstyle the next day, which makes Stephanie mad. This is Stephanie's problem in the story. Our next finger on our retelling hand is events. What happens in the story? Well, first, Stephanie tries to wear her hair in a ponytail at the back of her head, and even though her classmates call it ugly, they copy her hairstyle the next day. After that, Stephanie wears her hair on the top of her head. Her classmates call that hairstyle ugly too, but they copy her again. Then, Stephanie wears her ponytail in front of her face, and the classmates call it ugly, but then they still copy it again the next day. These are the events and what happens throughout the story. Our last finger on our retelling hand is, how do they solve the problem? What's the solution, and how do the characters fix it? Well, Stephanie tells everyone that she is going to shave her head. So, the next day, all of her classmates and even her teachers came to school the next day with shaved heads. but Stephanie tricked them because she did not shave her head. She had a nice ponytail on her head, and no one was going to be able to copy her hairstyles anymore because they had no hair. That's how Stephanie solves her problem in the story. We did it! We just did a 5-finger retell with the story of Stephanie's ponytail. In our retell, we have all of our important parts, including our characters, the setting, the problem, the events, and the solution. We remembered all 5 fingers for our retell. Now you're ready to use the 5-finger reading strategy when you read a book independently. I want you to use the 5-finger graphic organizer and fill it out with words or pictures after you have read your Just Right book, or you can simply make your own graphic organizer by tracing your hand just like I did in this video. Give it a try on your own.